I'm Brigantia Blackbird of Blackbird's Brew. Happy Tuesday. Thank you for tuning in on this video that's coming outside the normal schedule. I've been having a few thoughts about the identity crisis, the identity obsession we've been watching unfold in our society, and I just wanted to toss it out there and hopefully generate some further discussion about it, whether it be on this channel or at Blackbird's Brew on our Discord server or just amongst people generally. So let me walk you through a couple of the thoughts I've had going around in my brain. We are living in a time when there is a mass obsession over questions of identity. So I realize it may seem counterintuitive to claim that this crisis stems from the distinct lack of an identity, or at least the lack of a meaningful identity. But first we got to take into consideration how the younger generation is being raised. There seems to be less emphasis as kids are being brought up for those children to become well-rounded human beings. And when you're not really well-rounded, when you don't really see that being a human being is multi-layered and multi-textured, and it's this wonderful, complex exploration, I think that makes it much more likely that individuals will begin to form an illusion of identity around preferences that really have nothing to do with character. Because when you see these discussions about identity, where is the question of character? What is character? How is it manifested? What is the conduct? How do you see how someone's behavior matches with their ideals and is truly an expression of what they believe? And as far as values go, are these values life-oriented, or are these values self-destructive dead ends? You're not seeing that conversation, and I think it's important for those of us who are older, more experienced, and who are seeing, that the outcome of this sort of thing is not leading anywhere good. I think we need to start talking about it ourselves. I think we also have to admit that the general disintegration of family, be it a nuclear family, blended family, or whatever the family structure is, this is playing a big role in the confusion that so many younger people get lost in. It's through the family that we are giving this sense of continuity, that we are part of something larger than ourselves, that we are the current generation of it, and then there will be more going on in the future. It also separates us from a sense of culture, both as far as the culture we would have as Americans, and of course the wonderful ethnic cultures we've all inherited from our forebears. So without having a strong family structure, we lack the continuity, we lack the sense of culture, and we lack a big foundational building block of figuring out who we really are. And worse than that, there are various pressures in society that are intended to destroy culture. So in addition to not learning about those who came before us from family members, kids are also being taught to disdain the history of their nation, to disdain the history of any one of their ethnicity or the cultures from which they sprung. And this means that either you have inherited the sins of the world and it's your job to atone for it, which you never will be able to, but you still have to suffer for it, or that you are part of the group who are perpetual victims, can never overcome adversity, no one will ever value you properly, and what it does is it just sets people at odds with each other, and while at the same time you're giving them an enemy, you're also detaching them from having any sense of who they are. And of course, this means the message that everyone is getting is that whoever you are, just as a human being with your traits and your various qualities, your strengths and your weaknesses, whatever it is, it's not good enough. You've got to change in order to conform to the preferences and expectations of people who are determined to disapprove of you and or are determined to undermine you at every turn, because of course the goals of the people who promote this kind of ideology is to gain power. And it's not simply enough for them to have power and autonomy to act on their own behalf. They want power over other people because power is the goal rather than the means of achieving a goal. So when the young kids complain about feeling constantly judged and condemned and that they're always feeling insecure, I believe that the impressions that they are getting and the cues they're receiving has substance. I don't think that they're wrong about that. I just don't think they're correctly identifying the source of this judgment and condemnation and the impression that, they just aren't quite enough. Now, education also plays a role in this. And that's because our public schools are structured in such a way that it rewards conformity. It rewards the ability to regurgitate information on tests rather than understanding what the information actually means. And this means that teaching how to evaluate information, comparing, contrasting ideas, thinking about what ideas look like when they're put into practice, learning to listen to multiple sides of an argument, and doing independent research so you make up your own mind rather than having others made up for you. It's setting people up for failure. And it's not for nothing that schools are being increasingly described as indoctrination centers intended to generate people who will vote in a way that suits authoritarian politicians. Parents are concerned. They're very right to be concerned. Their children are not being treated as children. They're not being treated as human. They're being treated as pawns for social and political agendas. And that isn't right, not to treat anyone like that, let alone anyone who's as vulnerable and impressionable as a child who is looking to their elders. That means their parents, their teachers, people that they're exposed to in their spiritual community. They're looking for cues for the adults about how to start building themselves up and who they are, and they are being failed. And not just failed, they are being actively destroyed. So if you are being taught that you're little more than just a commodity, for someone else to use, and that there's a predetermined right answer to give lip service to, and if you don't give lip service to it, you will be punished and ostracized, that's going to leave a mark on the soul. And there are living examples of that all over the internet. And of course, I'm referring to the people who we see on social media who are making an exhibition of themselves and however they view their identity. And it's also not a coincidence that they are products of what I'm calling the Church of Woke. And it's just this amalgamation of all these different collectivist ideologies that are just destroying people from the inside out. And this enables them to feel incompetent at life, and that allows politicians and various people who think they know better to have control over them. And of course, the Church of Woke comes complete with its own language. And when we bear in mind that the purpose of language is to communicate, we've got to ask ourselves, what exactly is that language communicating? Now, there are rightly, people are pointing out, the contradictions, the vagaries, and logical fallacies of woke speak. But while they are correct in this analysis, they're also missing the point of this language. It isn't about conveying information or being consistent in any way or having this kind of cohesive worldview. The purpose is actually dual. First, it is tribal identification. If you are encountering other people who speak like this, you know what tribe they belong to. But it's also a way of forcing people to conform to the standards of the Church of Woke, because the Church of Woke has established itself as the moral authority. We are the source of all virtue. We will tell you what is good and what is bad, and if you cross us, we will persecute and punish you. Kind of sounds like another church from 1,500 years ago who decided that it was going to impose its ideologies onto other people. And we pagans know exactly how that one worked out, don't we? But moving on, this is why also the woke and the Church of Woke is described as a cult, because cults of all kinds, they tend to have their own idioms, their way of speaking, and it's a way to not just identify other members, but it's a way of separating the cult members from their family, from their friends, and from the rest of society as a whole. And if you look at the woke, that is the stated goal. First, these ideologies condemn society as a whole. Just the whole thing is bad from start to finish, and therefore we don't lose anything if we destroy it completely and start all over again. That's the foundation of it. Then it goes on to paint people in a bad light, particularly people who disagree. And then there's this intense pressure for the members to view reality through this really distorted lens. And it doesn't matter how untruthful that lens is, because it's not about what's real. It's not about what's true. It's about, are you doing what we tell you to do? It is about conformity and compliance. And then you have the stage in which it is asking people to compare their family and their friends to things that the Church of Woke disapproves of. And that breaks the ties, the natural human ties that we have with others, and transfers allegiances to the Church of the Woke. And this is the point at which people are obliged to put their ideas into practice. And this means allowing their ideology to destroy important relationships, rejecting people they used to love, and feeling virtuous while they do it. And of course, the affirmation from other wokesters is confirms their choices and their status within the cult. This is why we are seeing this hyper-collectivism becoming the order of the day. Now, you might point at, what seems to be hyper-individualism, when it comes to manner of dress and grooming, sexual preferences, declaration of gender identity, but it's all paper thin. This is a veneer. It is the illusion of individualism, but what it is something far more sinister. So what difference does it really make if we have people who are going to great difference to look different from others or behave in a manner that greatly deviates from the norm, or that it takes them a full 5 minutes to inform the world in the manner in which they prefer to be addressed, when these same people are trapped in an ideological lockstep that they cannot get away from without consequences? There's so much fear associated with this entire movement. And I think that a lot of these kids are driven to various forms of collectivism out of a sense of desperation to belong somewhere, because so many of them, their parents are never around. They don't have, large families or very close families, or their families are separated by a lot of geography. The only sense of approval from adult figures they get on a regular basis comes from school teachers. A lot of children are being raised without any kind of religious or spiritual background, so they don't have anything to combat this. They're essentially being given one message, is that collectivism is the way and you are going to conform with it. So once they have this illusion of acceptance from other collectivists, and this has been achieved, they become terrified to give it up, and they're afraid to do or say anything that might endanger it, because then they'll be alone. And they'll be worse than alone, because everyone will be disapproving of them and hating on them just the way they have been taught to. These people are stuck. And worse, it's not just people as an adults. We have kids who are stuck. So instead of being able to be themselves and feeling secure to be themselves and allowing themselves to go through the natural growth and evolution process through life, they now have this persona that has to be maintained, and they have to double down on it. Because if they ever find themselves questioning the church of woke, that could bring their entire life crashing down. Never mind that the life that they're protecting is more illusion than reality. It's still scary to face that tumbling down around your ears. And of course, these apocalyptic narratives, notably the climate change catastrophists, they are by far the most guilty. This is indoctrinating younger people into thinking that they and everyone else is doomed. Life has no meaning, no purpose. Only the crusaders are moral. Everyone else is evil. But of course, it's all going to be doomed to failure. So not only do young people get trapped in an ideology, get stuck in a persona, but they're also expected to take up this mantle of activism, and that being faced as their only choice forward to be good in life. And of course, if they don't, they're facing criticism, social disapproval from the other wokesters if they fail to do this. So the sense of being trapped and the sense that failure is inevitable and all effort is really moot and will be for nothing, is it any wonder that mental illness, very severe mental illness, is running rampant through our society? The individuals who cannot see that there are other ways to live, or that this ideology is flat out wrong and destructive, they're caught in a horrible, horrible feedback loop. We as human beings, we can find ways to live without a lot of things if we have to, but no one can live without a future. People can exist without one, but they can't live. And just existence is really insufficient. So the way people have been sabotaged, especially the younger generations, it is just cruelty beyond description. I mean, if you want to see a lack of respect for human life, you can find it in the church of the woke. Now, because we are living in an age of really bad ideas coming to full fruition, it is highly probable that we are all going to be experiencing harder times than we are accustomed to in the future, because ideas have consequences, and the more they're practiced, the more pronounced those consequences will be. So we are likely to find ourselves, I don't want to say at rock bottom, but certainly in a pretty disagreeable place. And in that situation, we're all going to need to prove our mettle. And that might actually be what saves some of the people who've gotten caught up in all of the wokeism. When you think about it, people are seldom required to prove themselves in any significant way. Simply declaring themselves to be this, that, or the other is enough in a lot of people's minds. Now, this isn't true, but people are committed to reinforcing that illusion. It takes a lot of hard work to do it. It actually takes more effort to maintain the illusion than it does to come out of it, but we'll get to that. But you think about, the effort and resources it takes to maintain appearances. That's just burdensome by definition. And then you have the emotional strain involved when it comes to arguing with people who are not participating in your own personal illusions. Because without validation and affirmation, disagreement tends to poke holes in illusions, and that makes those illusions even harder to maintain. And then there are internal doubts that people have to contend with. If we're being dishonest with ourselves, on some level, we know it. And we can't hide forever from our own minds and hearts. People who do, they end up in a very bad, very ill psychological place. All this being said, in hard times, reality has a way of intruding and breaking through all manner of self-deception. Process isn't fun, it isn't pretty, but it can be rewarding. It is an opportunity for all of us to make our peace about things that we've previously avoided in our lives and to move forward in an honest fashion and to build a genuine character. And that means having a genuine identity. Of course, it's hard to see in the moment, but sometimes the best thing that can ever happen to a person is a destruction of personal illusions. So when that happens to us or to someone we care about, the main thing is not to run away from the knowledge or to try to pretend that we can't see what's staring us in the face. Just simply acknowledging that and that it is what it is, regardless how we feel about it, and being able to live with that knowledge, that is a step in the right direction. And we can figure out the ramifications as we go along. One thing we can do actively is to begin eliminating untruths from our lives, especially when that dishonesty comes from within. Search for solid ground, the things that remain consistent regardless of, our perspective or our hopes or our fears, things that are real. That is a foundation upon which we're able to build. And then contemplate the idea of reputation, specifically from the perspective of the Norse, because the idea of building up a reputation was very important in that culture. And reputation, of course, was built on deeds, on skills, demonstrable skills, that is, defined by your successes and your failures, whether or not you were competent and preferably proficient in your profession. Did you take care of your family? Were you a good marriage mate? What kind of neighbor were you? Reputation was about character and conduct, not about, superficial preferences, in entertainment or lifestyle or how you define your gender or your sexual orientation. It was character and conduct. So if ever you need to rebuild your life and your sense of self, those are solid areas to focus on. Now, I think it goes without saying, but in case there's any doubts, I just want to make it clear that I don't wish suffering on anyone. But facing adversity in life is inevitable, especially given the way current events have gone lately. And this adversity is an opportunity for productive change. Perhaps some of the people who struggle with who they are, they may come out of this adversity better and more real than they were when they went in. Once we lose our illusions, we are left with who we really are, and we can decide if we like or dislike that person and then proceed accordingly. I think it's important also to try to not regret any lost time, not too much, not more than what you can help, because the main thing is to look for lessons in our bad experiences, the lessons in our poor choices, and the lessons in what happens when you listen to people who are sprouting detrimental ideas and permit no dissent or discussion about them. So we can focus on moving forward if we or someone that we care about is coming out of this lack of identity crisis. The past is what it is. The past cannot be changed. What matters is the choices we are making today. Are we being honest with ourselves in the here and now? Our identity is something that we can make out of durable materials if we are willing to take the time and the trouble to do so. So that's what I have to say on the subject. What do you think? I would love to hear all about it. Please come visit me on Blackbird's Brew, and we can carry on our discussion there. There is a link to join in the description box below. You can also subscribe to this channel, like this video, leave a comment to continue the conversation that way. And then, of course, with all of these more social commentary videos, please feel free to share this on your social media. That might start some thoughts, might get some people thinking, you know, maybe there is something we need to examine here. We can't do anything so much about the damage that's been done, but we can address things moving forward. And I think it's important to start thinking about, you know, at a certain point, I think things are going to have to run their course. The tide is going to come in. But once that happens, then we can start making different choices, and preparing ourselves to do that now, I think, will serve us well in the future. So I look forward to hearing reactions to this. But for now, see you in the next video.